It's my pleasure to introduce our scientific director, Dr. Felicity Emerson, who's going to share an update on our collaborative research network and our research priorities. So some of the things that you heard Tim talk about with the Breakthrough Research Fund we're going to take a little bit of a deeper dive into what that means and what it looks like in terms of our research. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kelly. So like Kelly said, I'm going to talk about our collaborative research network for ALD, talking about what it is, what we've done so far to kick it off, and then what are our goals for the upcoming years. Okay, so as Kelly just reviewed, we received a competitive Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, or CZI grant, through their Rare as One network. So this is a grant that's awarded to nonprofit organizations working in the rare disease space. And the main initiative of this grant was to launch a collaborative research network or to improve a collaborative research network for the disease. So in our case, we are launching a collaborative research network for ALD. Well, what does that mean? It's a network in which researchers, scientists, and patients are aligned and work together to identify top priorities for ALD research and then work together towards those priorities. And so, as I think we all know in this room, it's critical that the patient voice is incorporated into research and treatment priorities, which is why in the Collaborative Research Network, we want to have a joint effort between patients, scientists, and researchers. So it just makes sense that patients should be at the forefront of research and treatment priorities. We know that if we have patient buy-in for trials, those trials are more likely to be successful. If we have clinical outcome measures that are demonstrated to be impactful for patients and families, and we're really working towards making a meaningful difference in people's lives. And while this all makes intuitive sense, it's also been now formally recognized by guidelines from the FDA, as well as the European Medical Association, that they really want to hear from the patients as well when facilitating drug development, going along with what Kelly just talked about with the patient-focused drug development initiatives that we've worked on for several years. But how do we make sure that we actually incorporate the patient voice when thinking about scientific priorities for research? So that's the idea of this collaborative research network. We see it as a network between patients, healthcare providers, and scientists in which there's an exchange of ideas and priorities between all three groups. So for example, healthcare providers and scientists coming up with their research priorities and then having feedback from patients of what is really the most important to them, and vice versa, hearing directly from patients first and then getting the feedback from healthcare providers and scientists. So the idea of our collaborative research network is that we have open exchange between those groups and then develop a set of research priorities. And so these would be the top ideas to tackle in ALD research and what our collaborative research network has identified as the most important ideas to go after first. Then once we have those research priorities, our idea is to then fund that research, and that would be using the Breakthrough Research Fund that Tim and Kelly went over this morning. So it's really important for us to be able to raise those funds so that we can have that interaction with our collaborative research network and directly fund the projects to help accelerate science that matters to both our scientists and our patients and families. Okay, so that's the idea of the collaborative research network. This, as Kelly shared, was kicked off by the award of our CZI grant, which was in October of 2024. And so I'll share some progress that we've made so far and our goals for the future. So after we were awarded the grant in October, the first initiative the first step that we took towards the collaborative research network was to put out a survey of patients and families, and this was from February to April of 2025. And so, like we said, we wanted to hear from patients and families directly and ask them what are their most pressing concerns, what do they think needs to be tackled most in ALD research. So we put that out first so that we could hear directly from them, and we knew that we also wanted to host a scientific meeting of academics to brainstorm research ideas, and before going into that meeting, we wanted to have these survey results that we could summarize and present to our researchers so that they could make sure to keep in mind the patient voice when thinking through their research ideas. Okay. So I'll talk about this survey itself and what our patients and families said. So like I said, this was a survey that we put out from February to April, and the goal was to obtain patient and family perspectives on top priorities in research. We did receive 91 eligible entries from ALD patients and families, so thank you so much to everyone who took the time to fill this out. Okay. So just to give you an idea of who answered our survey, we had 43% of respondents say that they were an ALD patient, 21% said they were a parent or caregiver, 32% said they were both a parent or caregiver and a patient, highlighting, as we know, that there are many individuals who have dual roles in the community. And then about 2% were a spouse of an ALD patient, and 2% were both a spouse and a parent of an ALD patient. And you can see that we did get representation from all individuals of all phenotypes in this survey. So AMN, symptomatic women with ALD, individuals with adrenal insufficiency, cerebral ALD, and asymptomatic individuals. We did get a higher proportion of individuals who answered the survey who were adults with spinal cord disease, so men with AMN and symptomatic women with ALD. And that's also shown by the average age of the patient who was represented. So the average age of patients were 38. So higher population of adult patients, but still encompassing all of the phenotypes. Okay, so the first question we asked people to answer was, what are your top priorities for ALD research? And we provided these answers and asked people to rank from 1 to 3 of what are your top priorities. And so you can see the top priorities that were identified by patients and families were better treatment for symptomatic women, and early detection and diagnosis, and better treatment for men with AMN. So, this may seem obvious in some ways that we need better treatments, but I think it's still helpful to just have it documented, illustrating that adult patients in particular, in this case, are not satisfied with the current treatments. The symptomatic treatments that are provided are not enough, and so better treatments are urgently needed. And that was shortly followed by gene therapy as a priority, understanding disease variability, which we talked a lot about yesterday, as well as improved access to care and resources. Okay. We then asked, what are the most important issues that you want your doctor to focus on when you're treating ALD? And this was overwhelming, that patients and families said to stop or halt disease progression and to prevent cerebral ALD. So those two answers were far and above everything else, including increased ability to walk, understanding genetic variants, reduced pain, et cetera. So really clear answers of what patients and families want us to work on. We asked, what are the most bothersome symptoms for you or your loved one with ALD, and allowed participants to select up to 3 options. And so, as we might expect, we got a wide variety of answers. We know individuals with ALD often have many symptoms that are bothersome. But as expected for adults, in particular with myelopathy symptoms, the top answer was balance issues, spasticity, bladder issues, pain, altered gait, cerebral ALD. So all of the symptoms that we expect. We next asked patients, what do you think is the greatest unmet medical need for individuals with ALD? And again, the top answer was finding effective treatments for neurological symptoms. So again, highlighting that patients and families are not satisfied with the current treatment options and new treatments are urgently needed. Importantly, the second most common answer was access to experts, which is something that we heard repeatedly throughout this survey, that improved access as well as improved knowledge of ALD for non-experts is urgently needed. And then improved clinical trial access and participation was the third most common answer. We also asked, what is one thing that should be changed in how ALD is treated or researched? This was an open response, which we then went in and categorized into the most common themes. The top answer was, again, treatments. Someone said, my son would join a research study in a heartbeat, but there are not many opportunities out there. The next most common theme of answers were more specialists and making more doctors aware of ALD. Someone commented, make more doctors aware of diseases. Non-specialists will tell you that you are crazy and an over-concerned parent when symptoms are present. And I think that's something that we've all heard again and again and need to continue to work towards making more doctors aware of the disease. And then the third most common answer was inclusion of symptomatic women, and we had people specifically call out women with ALD should be included in clinical trials. We then asked, what do you think are underexplored research topics? Again, this was open response, which was then categorized based on themes. And again, same type of things coming out, treatments and symptomatic women. So we're seeing repeatedly that we need better treatments and that symptomatic women need to be included in research. The next most common answers were around diet, exercise, and lifestyle choices. So people talked about wanting lifestyle support for pre-symptomatic patients. Are there specific evidence-based exercise programs that I can do? Wanting more information about that. And then next most common was risk stratification, which again we talked about a lot yesterday, and understanding why some boys have cerebral ALD while others get AMN and the variability of symptom onset in women. We then asked, how should we improve care and research? This was open response, so I'm just showing you a few of the answers here. So people said, those with rare diseases can't wait for years and years for potential remedies. We need solutions as quickly as we can get them. Someone called out that we should trust that sometimes the patients that have lived with this for years, sometimes and even often, have more knowledge than doctors, which I think is really critical and illustrates why we need to include patient voices in the collaborative research network, because you are all truly experts on yourselves. Then people mentioned, don't forget those who are less severely affected. We want our voice to stay that way. And again, calling out that symptomatic women should not be ignored. Many will endure chronic pain, loss of mobility, and multiple financial challenges. And again, the finding specialists in underserved areas. So I think common themes that came across from this survey is, of course, we know that our ALD patients and families are invested in research and need to be considered when determining top research priorities. We know very clearly that patients want effective treatments and are not satisfied with the current symptomatic treatments for adults with ALD, and they want to slow or stop disease progression and prevent cerebral ALD. And then again and again, treatments and research for symptomatic women were called out in this survey, and that was a top priority for the community and an underexplored research topic. And then access to experts was another common theme that came out, and as well as awareness of ALD in the medical community. So those were the main conclusions of the survey. And again, thank you to all of you who participated in that. And so that survey was completed in April, and we summarized it into basically the slides that you just saw, and into a document which we then prepared for our scientists and researchers ahead of our May 2025 scientific meeting. So we asked our experts to review that, document before going in to keep the patient voice in mind, and we also presented the results of that survey at the meeting as well. So we then hosted our May 2025 meeting. This was our Collaborative Research Network kickoff meeting. It was May 8th to 9th in Minneapolis. And this served as the first convening of the Collaborative Research Network initiative. It was really a brainstorming meeting. So it was 2 days of getting together, brainstorming, and discussing. And the goal was, again, to identify research priorities and lay a foundation for transformative projects. So for participants in this particular meeting, there were ALD experts and researchers, emerging investigators who Kelly just told you about, as well as potential donors. And the focus was really on academic perspectives for this first initial meeting. And the purpose was to allow for really open exchange of ideas and discussion between academics to identify research priorities and facilitate new collaborations and initiatives. Okay. So we wanted to go over a little bit of the structure of the meeting for everyone who was not there so that you're aware of what was discussed at the meeting. So it was a 2-day meeting. Day 1 was kicked off by a keynote address from Dr. Florian Eichler, who talked about the past, present, and future of ALD research. We then had a session of opportunities and challenges in ALD research. So this was a session in which the presenters were asked to talk about specific topics and to give background, highest priorities in that topic, opportunities for collaboration, and challenges. And so the structure of this meeting was a little bit different than traditional scientific meetings like you saw yesterday, because the goal was really to facilitate discussion amongst all of the participants about the broader field. So we asked, for example, Dr. Fatimi to talk about innovative therapeutic approaches, Dr. Lund talked about biomarkers, Dr. Bonkowski about data sharing, and Dr. Berger about basic science. And so they gave an overview of the field rather than talking specifically about their lab's research, and then talked with everyone more broadly about next steps in that particular topic. We then had a lightning round of presentations with novel project proposals. And so just to give you an idea that there were many novel project proposals from our emerging investigators as well as others that covered all sorts of different topics, from astrocytes to animal models to SARM1 inhibition to genomics. So lots of different new ideas. We just asked people to come with a bold new idea. It didn't have to be completely fleshed out yet. So again, the goal was really to facilitate brainstorming and making new connections. Okay. Then day 2 of the meeting, we started off by talking about the grant that we received. That was the Rare as One video, and then presented the community survey results that you just saw and asked people to keep in mind those results when going forward with brainstorming for the afternoon. We then heard a family and donor perspective from Tyler and Joey Hall from the Will to Cure ALD. And then we had a series of brainstorming activities, which I'll go through in more detail in a second. And we ended the day with our hot topics panel discussions, which were focused on different topics. So boys, symptomatic women, men with AMN, genetics, imaging, and inflammation. And again, so these were panel discussions which were led by top experts in the field. And again, the goal was to really facilitate discussion. So rather than talking specifically about an individual's research, to talk more broadly about initiatives of where we need to go within that particular topic in the field and how we can best help people. Okay. So the brainstorming initiatives were different than you see at typical meetings, so I wanted to spend a minute talking about them. So the first brainstorming was the biggest breakthroughs, and big shout out to Kelly, who put so much work into organizing this meeting and came up with these great ideas of how to brainstorm and organize everyone's ideas. So the biggest breakthroughs was this brainstorming topic where we were each given a bunch of Post-it notes and asked to come up with as many ideas in 10 minutes for each topic as we could. So we had 4 rounds. The first round was low-hanging fruit. So what are the most obvious research ideas that should be done right away and are kind of the easiest to tackle? The second was collaborative research initiatives. Third was transformative discoveries. And fourth was large-scale projects. So we asked people to brainstorm as many ideas as they could and then organize them in the room on these sticky notes, as you see. We then asked people to star with little stickers what their favorite ideas were from other people. And what we saw from that is the top ideas that people liked the most and put the most stickers on were worldwide newborn screening, longitudinal biomarkers, preventative therapy for cerebral ALD, discovering the cell-specific effects of ABCD1 dysfunction, and fully understanding ABCD1 dysfunction. Some of the best collaborative ideas from biggest breakthroughs were to publish all unpublished observations. So we know that there's been a lot more done for ALD than we're able to see in the literature, and having all of that shared would facilitate non-duplicative efforts as well as increased knowledge. Data sharing, common data repositories across centers, and then the issue of reclassifying VUSs. So all kind of topics that we hear about a lot at meetings, but prioritizing what is thought to be the most important to start with. We then had this second brainstorming activity called World Cafe. So in this activity, we were assigned to random groups in the room, and each group was assigned a topic, so either boys, men, symptomatic women, or cerebral ALD. And we were given a board here to write our ideas on. So we were asked to write the most pressing unmet needs and research ideas for that patient population for about 10 minutes. And then after the 10 minutes were up, each group switched to the next board and reviewed the previous group's answers, edited them, and added to it. So I won't go through all of the ideas that were brainstormed, but I just wanted to put them up here just to show you that we know there are many unmet needs and research ideas for each population, and that's something that people were actively thinking about. So for boys, for example, genotype, phenotype correlations, as Dr. Kemp was talking about, understanding standardization and the importance of that, as well as access to specialists. So many different ideas here. Again, for men, many different ideas, including understanding the natural history, clinical trial design, better models, the importance of mental health. And these are all also available. They've gone out in one of our newsletters, so they're also on our website. If you want to read all of them at a later time, you can also find us to help you find those slides too. For symptomatic women, same thing, lots of ideas, including female cell types in studies and better understanding the natural history in women. And then for cerebral ALD, for example, finding ways to halt cerebral ALD and those with less scores greater than 10, we know is a big unmet need, preventative therapy, understanding spontaneously arrested cerebral ALD, et cetera. So a few areas of critical discussion that I just wanted to highlight because they were themes that were talked about repeatedly during the meeting were the use of biomarkers in predicting disease course and risk stratification. So I know that's something we've talked a lot about with C26 lyso-PC, and neurofilament light chain was also discussed at the meeting. So understanding what are different centers doing currently and what we should do, should there be a uniform approach in the future, was a topic of discussion. There's also a lot of discussion about how we need to standardize data collection and data sharing across centers, including challenges of that, for example, with regulatory issues of data sharing across institutions, and how we can act as a consortium. Reclassifying variants of uncertain significance, another hot topic of discussion, curative versus symptomatic treatments, and then importantly, inclusion. Can we make inclusion criteria for clinical trials that does not include sex? So can we make inclusion criteria based on disease progression rather than saying you have to be a male with the disease to qualify for the trial. So that was in May 2025. We then reviewed that meeting information with the Industry Advisory Council, which is our group of industry members and scientists interested in ALD in June. We summarized the research priorities like you saw and sent that out to participants of the meeting in July. And then we established our Breakthrough Research Fund in September of 2025. So we're trying to move forward now that we have some of those initiatives to raise money so that we can fund some of these ideas. And of course, now we're reviewing the information again with all of you. So this has been the progress that we've made so far on the Collaborative Research Network, and looking forward to the next year and beyond. Some of our goals are we will very soon have a Collaborative Research member directory on our website, so we're asking people to fill out information about themselves so that you can all see who's involved with this initiative. We also will accept applications to join the Collaborative Research Network. So right now, the group that was invited to Minnesota was a very small group of experts because we wanted really open discussion with a small group of people, but we do intend to open applications to a wider audience of people who are interested in joining. We then aim to accept and review grant proposals next year, so we'll put out a request for proposals. And we aim to fund our first round of research projects using the Breakthrough Research funding next year is our goal. And again, when those applications are reviewed, they'll be reviewed by a research committee, and we'll be keeping in mind the priorities that have been identified from our meeting as well as from our patients. And then pending funding, something that we hope to do either next year or probably the year after would be host a larger meeting with our researchers, but also with our patients and families. And so we have applied for a funding source to be able to do this. And if we do receive the funding, we would love to host another meeting so that we can have an open discussion between patients as well as researchers at the same meeting. Okay. So that is it so far, and I'm happy to take any questions. The question is there any harm in describing symptomatic women with ALD in the category of adrenomyeloneuropathy, right? So that is a huge hot topic question, I think, and I think you would get different answers from lots of different people. And I can see there's arguments in both directions. I think the most important thing is not to identify symptomatic women as carriers, since we know that they're not carriers. They do have symptoms. But I think people have very different opinions on should we categorize everyone together, and that could be beneficial in some ways potentially for insurance reasons, or for incorporating them, like being recognized by the same name could be helpful for treatment or for clinical trials, for example. But then there are also arguments that there are differences between symptomatic women aren't expected to get, for example, adrenal insufficiency or cerebral ALD. So there can be differences. And so there are definitely arguments in both directions, and I think that's a great question and something to be further discussed.
It's okay. I was going to toss the ball to Keith to talk a little bit about the playbook, if you will, for the breakthrough research, and that we have a process.
Tim, you're referring to the review process and the workflow. Yeah, so the workflow we plan to use for identifying the best grants and projects will be based on the NIH grant review workflow. It involves a group of scientists that are assigned to projects that are in their domain. So even within the ALD field or the leukodystrophy field, there are people who have expertise in one area or another. So we would put out a call for projects all over the world. We expect to receive projects from all over the world. Those projects will come in on a certain deadline. They get triaged by Felicity, likely, who will say, okay, these fall in this particular domain, these fall in this particular domain, and then there'll be a research committee assigned to kind of moving those to the right reviewers. Those reviewers will be recruited from our leukodystrophy research community and beyond. If there are not specific reviewers we have that are, immediately within a domain, we might find somebody outside the community and say, hey, listen, this is your area. We'd like you to review this paper or this grant application. We then have the reviewers score all of the grants, their grants according to certain criteria. How novel is it? How good are the methods? How likely is an important breakthrough? That kind of thing. Those are then brought back to a group meeting. The group of reviewers who reviewed the grants discuss it as a group, and sometimes the opinions on the grants change as the opinions are shared. And one reviewer might say, "I thought this was great," while another one says, "No, there were problems in this area." They discuss. The committee then arrives at a new score and decision. Those become the final scores, and then those are used to rank the grants for a final decision. The top scoring grants are usually the ones awarded funding. And that's a fairly standard process for most scientific institutions. But that's how it works. It's a human-run process, and there are always ways to improve the process, but that's how we're planning to run it at this point. And we think that's also the best way to try and identify the very best candidates we can.
Okay, thank you.